Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and I'm joined once again by the wonderful, the enigmatic, and the delightfully bearded Arekkz. Say bonjour, mon ami.
Bonjour, mon ami. I see how you paused it there because you were going to be like, say hello, Arekkz. I see every time you're trying to get me here. But yes, how's it going? Good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yes, oh, you're very welcome. It's imperative that we have you on because today we're going to be talking about Monster Hunter World and why it will not be coming to the Nintendo Switch, which is a sad thing. At least it is for me. Presumably for you as well.
What's Monster Hunter? Never heard of it.
I'm sorry. I think I must have got the wrong Arekkz. No, anyway. The reason we've got Arekkz on is because Monster Hunter World is not a Nintendo... Well, it's not coming out to Nintendo Switch, and therefore I haven't played it because it's in my contract. No, I just haven't got around to it, unfortunately. But Arekkz has played it to absolute death, so he is a much more reliable source on this matter. So it's not coming to Switch, is it?
No, sadly not. It's, I've said it this year, like, even though Switch hasn't been out for that long, it is my favourite console to have ever existed. So I love it, and I kind of jokingly, every time a new game comes out, I'm like, where's the Switch version? I want, like, Switch for every game. And as a huge Monster Hunter fan, and, like, someone that's I've played all the handheld ones, so, like, I would have loved, whether it be World or, like, a version on Switch, but obviously kind of, like, looking at the bigger picture and understanding what World is, I understand why it's not on Switch. It is, it's no disrespect to the console, because I love it, but it is not powerful enough to run Monster Hunter World. That's the be-all and end-all of it, really.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because, I think a lot of people have taken that stance. But we've already seen games like Doom and Wolfenstein 2 is coming to Switch as well. So
True.
What is it about Monster Hunter World that would make it theoretically incompatible with Switch? Because, with enough refinement, then is it not even possible?
To a certain degree, yeah. Anything like that is possible. I'm going purely based on... Because, I'm not a designer, so on the technical aspect, I can't profess to know exactly why it doesn't. But I know from there was a recent interview with one of the directors, and they basically said that, ultimately, the vision they wanted to... that they wanted to try and sort of, push with Monster Hunter World just wouldn't have been technically possible. What they wanted, what they wanted to achieve wouldn't have been technically possible on the Switch. I can only assume that's because, it's considerably, it's a much bigger game. There's all these kind of seamless, there's no loading screens, there's nothing like that. So, say loading screens. No loading areas between the different zones in the map. So, it's this big, seamless open world. It's just much bigger than it's ever been before. So, I can only imagine, at least from their technical standpoint, they weren't able to achieve that on the Switch hardware. That being said, it could well be that they could make, to the point of, looking at like Doom and stuff like that running on Switch. There's no reason to say they couldn't make like a Switch version of World, but I imagine there would have to be some sacrifices they would make. And I suppose the big question to ask then is, would Capcom, and maybe by extension Nintendo, be happy with that? Because, would it, especially if you try to sort of sell it as like, oh, here's Monster Hunter World, cool, it's on Switch, but it's, it's the lesser version. Would that be a nice marketing point for them, or would they be like, I'd rather have my own Switch, Monster Hunter, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, you're right. Well, just for the listeners, I've actually got the quote here, ready and waiting, because for once I've done, some proper preparation for a video. Just imagine that. The quote comes from Capcom, and it says, and I quote, and I'll get it up on the screen as well, so you're not just listening to me babble. We don't have any plans for the Switch at the moment. Part of the reason is that the title has been in development for almost 4 years. At the time we had to commit to our hardware choices, we decided on using the most powerful current generation consoles available at the time, which was the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So, the decision was made before the Switch was even announced or on sale. It's also because for every title we decide what the best fit for hardware is for the concept. We don't just look at everything. It's more like, if we want to achieve this kind of game concept, where's the best place to achieve that? And for this title, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were the best fit for us, which I think is a perfectly reasonable explanation.
Yeah, definitely. I 100%. To the point of, having to develop the game before Switch was even, announced or revealed. And I think we know from, initially Capcom seemed pretty, tentative to sort of dip their toes into the Switch anyway. When they mentioned before when they released, Street Fighter 2, it was kind of like a test to sort of see the reception for the Switch anyway. So I feel like, yeah, I guess early on, during development, that definitely would have been like an interesting, or would have been a key factor to play into it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't think... Well, I would absolutely love for Monster Hunter World to come to the Switch, but I must admit I have kind of resigned myself to the fact that it probably won't. I'm more than happy to be proven wrong and that it comes out on the Switch and it manages to run beautifully and, it's mainly just sort of a graphical downgrade. That would be incredible. I would love it to pieces. But unfortunately, from what I understand of the game, technically it maybe is just a little bit beyond what the Switch is capable of. Again, I would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
And it is a massive shame because I love Monster Hunter. And, the fact that we're not even getting Monster Hunter Double Cross over here in the West on the Switch, I think is a real shame. And given the history that Capcom have with recently bringing Monster Hunter games to Nintendo platforms, it does feel like, at least from a fan perspective, it's a little bit disappointing.
It is. No, I definitely agree. I mean, as I said, I love the Switch and I love Monster Hunter. So being able to take it with, I spent a fair bit of time playing Double Cross. I downloaded it from the Japanese eShop anyway, just because it feels great to play on the Switch. So I would love, whether it be World or whether it be another experience, I would love a Monster Hunter on Switch. I think the important thing to remember though, and it doesn't just because they've kind of pushed or because World has come out on PS4, Xbox One, and obviously eventually PC, doesn't mean to say that that's the end of Monster Hunter on handheld or obviously on Switch, because the important thing to understand about the structure of the Monster Hunter team, they have two teams. So the team that made Generations, by extension Double Cross, and also Portable Third, is a separate team to the team that made World, and so World is headed up by Ryozo, Kaname, and Tokuda, and then the other team is Kojima, and I forget the other person's name, but basically there have always been two teams for Monster Hunter, so they can kind of work in tandem. So with that in mind, it's perfectly plausible that while there's obviously still going to be a big ongoing focus on World because they're working on the PC version, there's ongoing updates, DLC, things like that, it's possible that the other team is working on something. So if that's the case, then if you look as well at what's happened with Monster Hunter so far, I mean, the fact that 3DS got a localized version of Stories, which was a massive surprise for me, because I thought that was kind of a very niche game, and I didn't think we would ever get that, but Nintendo handled the localization for that. So we haven't got Double Cross, but it's still entirely possible that Nintendo could be like, you know what, we do want a Monster Hunter experience on handheld, we're going to localize Double Cross, and if that happens, maybe we get it a little bit later, which would be really cool. But also, to that point of what I was just saying, the fact there are two different teams, now that Double Cross is essentially done, that other team's got to be working on something, right? So it's entirely possible that if they haven't just joined the World team and just worked on the DLC, they might instead be working on something else. So I feel like it would be cool if whether we get a version of World or whether we get a completely new experience for Switch, I definitely still want to see it, and I think it's definitely still possible. But yeah, I honestly think the more likely thing we would see would be eventually a Switch version of Monster Hunter as opposed to a Switch version of World specifically. That's what I personally think we'd see.
Well, I just, if they do something like that, I just hope they bring it to the West, because I do think the Monster Hunter World is a much more sort of Western-focused Monster Hunter game. There are, quite a number of differences that sort of appeal, I would say, to a more Western audience. That's not to say, of course, that the original Monster Hunter doesn't appeal to people in the West. Of course, it does. That's why they've had a bit of a resurgence since Tri. But even so, I do hope that they make the effort to bring something to Switch and actually bring it out in English. That would be marvelous, because I can't speak Japanese.
True. I think they're definitely more inclined to do that, because just today, in fact, probably about 10 minutes ago, there's a tweet that went out to announce that Monster Hunter World has successfully shipped 5 million units in the first 3 days, which is a record for the Monster Hunter series. And I'm honestly so happy to see that, because obviously, again, as a massive fan of the series and someone that wants it to do well in the West, I had the chance to go over to Japan last year and speak to the developers and stuff, and they were working so hard. They really wanted this to be to appeal to the Western audience more so than it has done before. And yeah, the fact that it's hit those numbers within the first 3 days is mind-blowing. So without a doubt, Capcom Japan can sit there and be like, so there is a market for this in the West. So hopefully, with that in mind, they might be like, well, let's think about something to do for Switch. So
well, it may be that they try and marry, sort of elements from World that have been really successful in the West into the mainline series. Because, I mean, Monster Hunter World, is it considered the mainline series, or is it considered sort of more like a frontier?
It is actually mainline, yeah. This is essentially, although it's not named, this is essentially Monster Hunter 5.
Crumbs.
So it's the next, because the core team, so Ryozo and Kaname and Tokuda, they work on the main line, and then the other team work on. People don't always like me to refer to it like that, but Generations is technically speaking a spin-off title, so that team works like that. Yeah, same thing with Portable Third. They're still great games. They're still Monster Hunter games, but yeah, they're not mainline. So this is definitely the next one. Technically speaking, the successor to 4 Ultimate, I guess, in that respect.
Blimey, that's
But I agree with you. I agree. There's definitely a lot of really cool principles, and I think the interesting thing with this one will be what they do next. Because if they do, assuming whatever they work on next, this is kind of in the same way that we spoke about before when we talk about Zelda, kind of the sort of point of no return. Like, it's to go backwards now. Like, if we suddenly went from like World, where you've got these maps with no loading zones between the different areas and all these new systems, if I suddenly went back to a more traditional Monster Hunter where I had to load between different map zones, I'm not sure how I feel about it, to be honest.
Yeah, it is sort of, as you say, it's almost working backwards. I suppose, you know, in my head at the moment, the most likely prospect is that we carry on, you know, Nintendo, Capcom will carry on with the world formula, as it were, but it may be entirely that they adjust it so that it can run on multiple systems like, I don't know, the Switch.
That would be amazing. That would definitely be amazing. I would be so down for that, because that's the one thing. I mean, for example, this coming weekend, I've got to travel anyway, and I'll be away from it, and that would be perfect time to be like, I'll take the Switch on the train with me, but nope, I'm going to have 2 days with no monster hunting.
Oh, how will you cope?
I know, right? I know. What will I do? I'll just take my Switch with me and play something else.
Yes, indeed, if there is anything else right now. Oh, Breath of the Wild, that's still relevant. Let's go with that. But anyway, so it's possible then that we could be looking, it seems less likely we're going to be looking forward to Monster Hunter World on the Switch, but possibly a sequel?
Hopefully. I mean, I'd say definitely off those numbers, I'd say I'm pretty sure they're going to be like, they've got the confirmation they need that there's definitely appetite for this. So I would say that's a definite potential. And
I think they would be mad to miss out on the Switch market because it's growing so rapidly. It's just exploded, hasn't it?
100%. Yeah, I think if they were in a position now, if they were like in a boardroom meeting this morning, like, guys, we did 5 million units. Let's work on the World 2 or like Monster Hunter World 2, and they'd be like, all right, I reckon Switch would definitely be on that platform list for sure.
Absolutely, yeah, and it may well be that they're kicking themselves seeing these big numbers, thinking they could have been so much higher. But of course, you know, they didn't. You know, when they started development, they didn't know about the Switch, so you know, you can't blame them for that.
No, exactly, yeah.
No. But anyway, yes, I think that's very interesting. And Arekkz, thank you for coming along. Hopefully the audience found it interesting as well.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Well, we love having you on, especially when you can talk about things that I don't understand.
I love talking about Monster Hunter.
It's a good franchise. But anyway, thank you, Arekkz, for coming along, and thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, then why don't you bring that subscribe button too to the Nintendo Switch? And be sure to check out nintendolife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.